Shalom.
Shalom, Kira. Thank you for being with me.
Shalom. Of course.
Taking you back a few years ago, when you arrived in Israel at the age of 4 from the Ukraine, family of new immigrants, and you grew up in Nesha, sort of a geographic periphery, but quite quickly you became one of Israel's most successful high-tech entrepreneurs. When you look back at the early years, even when you were in high school or even middle school. What do you take back from that time in school, from your teachers and friends? What did you gain there that served you well later on in life?
So maybe let's start from the beginning, right? So when my parents left USSR itself was a very special place where engineers would get the lowest salaries and factory workers will get the highest. Everybody would get pretty much the same thing. But if you were specifically Jewish, there were certain jobs you couldn't do. You couldn't take any governmental jobs. Applying to university were prohibited from most universities. Unlike most worlds where you say like, if you have 20% of some population, the university should accept at least 20% of that subpopulation. Instead, USSR had a cap. So for example, in the University of Ukraine, only one Jewish person can be accepted every year. So in general, it wasn't a good place. And of course, nobody could leave because they were afraid that people would leave, see the West, see the devil in the West as well. And it all started changing when USSR started falling apart, especially from a lot of the pressure coming in from the United States and Israel to at least let the Jews go. And the official announcement was, well, we're letting the Jews go because they were never citizens to begin with. So I came from a family of only women, my mom, my aunt, my grandma. And only in 1990, they were allowed to leave. When you leave, you have to quit your job, then wait for a visa. So in other words, there's about 6 to 9 months where you have no income. Additionally, it's illegal not to work in USSR. So at any point, you can get arrested for even wanting to leave. So when we came to Israel, you couldn't take anything with you, no money, very limited amount of luggage. You arrive with nothing. The only thing that we came with is our education. And I think that made the biggest difference. And from the moment I can remember myself, so my mom, she's also a teacher in high school. All of them were computer science engineers, and they came to Israel and they said, we're going to start doing the first thing that we can do. We don't know the language. We came with nothing, but we can rebuild ourselves because we have the basics. We know how to make this work, right? And with a lot of optimism and knowledge, that's how they build themselves. So that's the thing they told me all the time. We're going to work, we're going to do everything possible, but you need to invest in your specific education, right? And since I can remember myself, and I think I have a short video of myself when I was 5, when people ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a scientist. That's what I want to do. I'm going to be focusing on that. I even at some point said, I want to be a professor focusing on that. And when I was 15, I was allowed to start studying in the university in parallel to my studies. I think one of the biggest things, specifically in Israeli schools, is all of those programs that you see right now, allowing some students to go and study in the university in parallel in specific tracks. When I studied it, it was very abnormal. There wasn't no way of both studying in school and university. You had to quit parts of schools, then go. Here, it's now much more organized, much easier. You don't need your parents to drive in the middle of the day, drive you from one place to another one, right? There's no specific task that you need to do. You just focus on what's important, which is education. I see my cousins right now. They're doing all of those amazing programs, going and studying about space. They want to, my cousin, for example, she won a program that her experiment is being sent to space to be studied, right? When we started doing this, we did not have those options. And I think what I remember the most from my junior high and high school is I want to study more, but I don't know from where. There wasn't a lot of information going online. There wasn't a lot of online in general, right? Encyclopedias, they can give you up till a certain value because sometimes learning from other people. And I think the biggest thing that helped me is the fact that I had the possibility of going to the Technion and studying from the best, just seeing other people who know more things and saying, I want to be like them. That would help me the most.
You shared with us that you grew up with 3 enormous female role models, your mother, your aunt, and your grandmother. How would you advise parents and teachers how to encourage their daughters, taking a gender perspective, and their female students to pursue learning at the highest levels of excellence as you did? What would you say to them?
I'll tell it through a story. When I was 21, I was in Microsoft Research here in the States. They called us to a conference and they talked about the glass ceiling. I asked the lady who was sitting next to me, "What is a glass ceiling?" She says, what do you mean? She's like, there is a cap to what you can do and it's almost invisible. It's like, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. I couldn't even imagine what she told me. And I think that was very unique in my family, right? We're only women. I didn't know there were things that women are not supposed to do or can or cannot do, right? I studied karate since I was 5.
You're a black belt in karate, right?
Yeah. Why? Because, I went to ballet lessons. I didn't like it. And I saw the other ones yelling and going barefoot. I wanted to do that the same. And my parents said, yeah, of course, go and do it. Nobody told me you're not supposed to do it because karate is not for women. When I wanted to study engineering, it was pretty clear. All my family are engineers, so I'm also doing that. I was afraid to go to the university. I said like, oh, I don't know. Now I'm 15. Everybody else is older. And my mom said, no, older means it would be harder for them to study. You're much younger. It's much easier for you to study. I think the first time I started seeing some difference is when I went to the army. Even in my high school, in the computer science class, we were all women. We had only maybe 2 men. Most of them were just immigrants from past USSR. And I don't know how that became, but it was just like pretty clear that it was a very normal thing to do. When I came to the army, I think this is the first time I started seeing a difference. I came to a unit who was mostly doing cybersecurity, and I was the only woman there beyond the EA of the manager. And to be honest, it never bothered me. The only thing that bothered me is the fact that they have shared bathrooms, right? And that is part of the change that all of those units had to go through, right? There's more and more women coming in, but there's so many different changes that need to happen. And again, when I came to university, we had 40% women in our bachelor's in computer science. And the biggest changes started happening, again, when you become a professor. So for example, at the Technion, there's only 3 women out of 50 professors. And the reason is because you have to go abroad and study. Usually people get married. It's less common in our society for a man to follow his wife's dreams as opposed to the other one, right? And I think this is the biggest changes that we need to make. I never thought that my parents told me my husband needs to follow my dreams. I don't know. I never thought there's something else that should happen, right? I knew I want to focus on science, and this is where I went to. I didn't know there was any societal punishments for doing what I think is right for me. And if you're asking what to do, just reduce all those barriers, right? Almost help them ignore what society is dictating, because you can grow in such a bubble.
So we're talking to educators, and the toughest prediction for educators is how to prepare the younger generation to a future that is yet unknown. But you have an idea about where the world is heading. Your fields of expertise are the cutting edge areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning. And you actually design systems that predict the future. So had you had the opportunity to talk to educators who are designing education systems of today? What topics and skills do you think should be taught today so that the next generation would enter the job market probably in 2040 being as ready as possible?
So I think the focus on computer software is something that we're seeing more and more. It almost became as a rudimentary skill that everybody has to have. Almost simple coding is something that you start to expect from everybody, from using Office to actually writing code and automating some of your work. I think the more we have AI tools, we need to have a more critic thought. In other words, there's so many things that are being generated, and we need to understand if they're correct or not correct. So teaching people how to use those tools. Why are they producing what they're producing? How do they work behind the scenes so we can understand their weaknesses and fix them? That's the biggest value I would teach right now. I'll give you an example from another field. I work with clinicians, right? And it's like, oh no, AI will replace us. Should anybody will even become an MD or not? I always say, look at EKG, right? EKG went out, and if before physicians actually needed to listen to your heart, right? Now they have an echo and they have EKGs and other tools that can help them make a diagnosis. It did not mean that we do not need physicians. We just need physicians knowing how to use new tools. The same thing I look at AI. AI is not going to replace physicians. AI is a tool they need to learn how to use to make better decisions. And if I had to teach right now in school, is to teach about AI as a tool which is not perfect, that can bring them a lot of value, and teach them about how to know to use it in a much better way in whatever discipline they're going to become.
And would you keep on teaching mathematics and languages and history? Is it still valid?
Of course, of course. So first of all, math is pretty much the basics of everything. You cannot understand AI or engineer without understanding math. That's pretty much the basics of the basics of the basics. It's sometimes I see how they teach computer science and they teach you only the high level. In other words, here's a command you give the computer and here's how the computer works. But most people don't understand how a computer is constructed, like that eventually how the electricity works, right? If you don't understand the world, you won't have curiosity. If a problem happens, you won't know how to solve it, right? And we need to go even deeper and deeper to all of those subjects. Why study history? You know, history repeats itself, right? So not everybody's going to become engineers. We need good politicians. We need leaders in different fields, and you need to understand what was happening in the past and what went right and what went wrong. I think round people is the best people who eventually become the best leaders, managers, and the future shapers of our world. So the rounder they are, the better.
So our final question for today, and we're talking to an audience of Israeli educators, and these are very challenging times in Israel. They will be in charge of shaping our future. What would be your message to Israeli teachers today?
You are the foundations of our future, right? I think we will know whether Israel is going to be successful and overcome the current challenges thanks to your work, right? If you'll do a good job, the next generation will flourish and Israel will flourish with the generation, right? So there's a lot of things in stake. I know everybody's taking their job seriously, but eventually we need to make sure that the generations that we have right now, and this generation went through a lot, from pandemics to wars. They've seen different shapes and how good leaders can lead us to good shapes and how bad leaders can get us to disasters. How do we get our current generation to be very knowledgeable, to know our history, not to give our perspective on history, to teach them how to develop their own perspective, to understand that a lot of the information and overflow of information that they're getting from social media, it's not always correct. Know how to fact check and have your own opinion, and understand that if you don't do something, nobody else will do it for you. And we're only strong if we're strong together. And I think that's the jobs of the teachers.
Thank you so much, Kira, for being with us and for these inspiring and important words. Thank you.
Of course.